Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 130, and in this episode I'm joined by Bob Doyle. Bob Doyle is best known as a featured expert in the film and book The Secret. He now focuses his coaching and training on neuroplasticity and your ability to rewire your brain so that you literally become the person who creates the results you want in life without having to adopt to any unusual belief system. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the law of attraction and personal transformation. So, Bob, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Will.
So, Bob, many people will have watched you and read about you in the book called The Secret, which obviously, as we just alluded to, is something that you were involved with, and the law of attraction has been a big part of your life for many years. Before we go into how you got into this work and why you still do the work that you do now, what's been the biggest personal benefit that you've gained in terms of insights or accomplishment that you've achieved as a result of doing the work that you do and knowing what you know?
Honestly, it's leading up to what I started teaching a few years ago, and which we'll most definitely talk about why that happened. But it's just, I think the personal development industry, and particularly the law of attraction conversation, it gets really complicated, and it makes this process of transformation this sort of mysterious thing. You got to learn this, that, and the other technique. And really what my work is about now is about how simple, not necessarily easy, but how simple the process of transformation and what transformation is and why it's and how to make it permanent. So that sort of aha moment that I had around 3 years ago around this has been probably the biggest thing since having my aha moments about the law of attraction 20 something years ago.
Wonderful. Well, we're certainly going to get stuck into that. You're absolutely right. So if we can go back 20 plus years ago to that moment when you did first stumble across the law of attraction, because there's lots of great people that work in this space. And what I find fascinating is why and how they got into the space. So what was that for you?
Well, just so the people know, I never intended to get into any sort of personal development industry. My goals in life were not about helping people. It was about finding something I loved to do to express myself creatively. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to go into broadcasting. My dad was in broadcasting. He was on TV, did voiceovers. I'm like, yes, that's what I want to do. Crazy character, just be silly, be on the radio and basically hide from people behind a microphone. That was kind of my plan. And so for 7 years, I did that. I worked in radio in a couple of markets. And then when I got to a big market in Atlanta, I really didn't have the creative flexibility. I hadn't really earned it yet to be able to do all the things I wanted to do. And being young and impatient, I just said, all right, fine, I don't need this. I'll just go do something else. And that began this journey of, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I jumped around from career to career, tried all sorts of things, tried starting businesses and so on. Nothing was feeling good and nothing was changing my money situation. And I was getting pretty frustrated. Being the son of a school teacher, I was a very sort of logical, analytical, dare I say skeptical by nature person. But at some point I was like, why is nothing working for me? And that's when I started looking sort of down more metaphysical roads, going into new age bookstores and reading about visualization and meditation and all of those things. And so these were conversations that sort of brewed in my head for a few years, but I got to the point where it's like, okay, I have to find out what's going on. So I started studying in earnest about this. How can we create our experience of reality? What is going on with me that I can't do it? That's what eventually led me to the law of attraction and studying that. And my ahas around the law of attraction were when I got to the science part, quantum physics, and realizing that our thoughts have energy too. And my logical brain loved that. It's like, oh, okay, it's not just, made up woo-woo stuff. There's something to this. So when I had my ahas around it and started just trying some of the things and seeing results, that's when I just said, well, I'm excited about this. I'm going to share it. So I put together a little program because in my search for how can I express myself creatively, I learned a bunch of stuff, how to do internet marketing, how to put audio programs together, how to do it all. So all those things that I tried that quote unquote failed actually, came together for me. And I said, okay, well, I know how to do this. So I put together this little program called Wealth Beyond Reason. Now, that was 2002. And so, literally 20 years ago. And that program was small at the beginning. And then I made a decision, which is kind of pivotal to this whole conversation, about who I was going to be in this conversation because I was really lit up by it. This was exciting. And I was very enthusiastic about sharing it, but I was also kind of a student. I wanted to know more. And I made the decision that instead of facilitating this information, just like taking stuff I'd learned from other people and saying, here, look what I learned, I wanted to be the source of information. Like I really wanted to give people a level of understanding that was even deeper than what I was getting. And when I decided that who I was going to be in the world and in this conversation was someone who could express, who could, share these principles effectively to as many willing, open minds as possible, that changed my whole conversation. It changed my demeanor. It changed how I made meaning out of things. It changed how I talked to people, how I wrote emails, changed everything. And then I started just these massive downloads of like insights, right? So that all turned that little program into this monster. And over the course of 3 years, it really grew to be this ridiculously huge law of attraction resource. And that is what got the attention of Rhonda Byrne, who put together The Secret. So when she was out there searching, like, who can teach this stuff and what, the different philosophies. I'm not Jack Canfield. I'm not Bob Proctor. I didn't have decades of experience in this. I'm not spiritual leader like, Michael Beckwith or anything. I'm just a guy who figured some of this stuff out and started teaching it. So I think they wanted that voice, just like hey, this can work for normal people too, who aren't woo-woo. So that's, I think, how I got into The Secret. And so that's really how I kind of got swept into the industry, which was weird because I never considered myself in the industry until The Secret. And then that actually began my own sort of personal crisis of like, who am I? Because I was a broadcaster. I'm a crazy, I just like to do voices and be silly. I just want to be silly. And now people are calling me Bob Doyle from The Secret. And I'm up there with Bob and Jack and all those other people. And Marcy, I'm like, well, who should I be? And so there were a couple of years there where I was just kind of stiff and generic and trying to get the message to everybody and not really loving it anymore. And plus, post Secret, the conversation changed. It was like, instead of everybody being hooray, hooray, the law of attraction or whatever, enthusiastic, now so many more millions of people saw it that weren't necessarily going to naturally go. Somebody said, you got to see this, right? And then they go, well, I don't agree with this. What about this? What about this? And so my career became like dispelling myths and just dealing with resistance. And it just wasn't as fun anymore until live streaming came along. And then the broadcaster in me could reawaken and I could find a way to be creative, find a way to use my broadcast background, my voice, silliness, just absurdity to get these points across. And then it became fun again.
Fantastic. So a couple of things that I want to delve into, because I think they're very important, was that you, and I know there'll be many people listening to this, you were on this pursuit of something that you loved, which was broadcasting, right? You're like, I want to be broadcaster, I want to be successful, but it wasn't happening for you. So what was it that you discovered that you wasn't doing that then you did start doing and it worked so well that you decided to start sharing it with other people?
Well, so broadcasting was one thing. And the thing I didn't do with broadcasting was just be patient like everybody else and just play the game. I just want to do it my way. I went out, I'm funny. You got to believe me. So I'm just going to go do my stuff. So that was the one thing. But with this law of attraction and wealth beyond reason and all that, I just settled in and it was really the clarity of it was the excitement. It was a feeling of purpose. And it was certainly at first very creative. I was creating programs. I was creating audio. I was doing all this stuff. So here's the thing about everything I do. It is driven by the desire to express myself creatively, whether it's this conversation, whether it's law of attraction work or neuroplasticity, or whether it's playing the ukulele or doing voiceover work. All these things that I do because I feel like I have to express creatively. And I think that's what everybody's here for. We are born to create. And if we talk ourselves out of it, say we're not good enough or say it won't happen for us, if we give ourselves a reason to not express, we start feeling it. Physically, we can get sick, we can get angry and resentful and all those other things. So I think just finding the joy in what I was doing was the most important part.
No, well, I completely get that in terms of the creative element. I think so many people, I talk a lot about the RIF symptoms. I call them the RIF symptoms: stress, overwhelm, frustration, depression, anxiety, unfulfillment, all these negative emotions, which are all ultimately a signal to think or act differently. And in the acting differently, if you're not expressing, you're not doing the thing you want to be doing, well, that's a very, very good indicator that you should be doing it, especially if you're experiencing those symptoms, at least in my sort of oversimplified way of putting things. So you've mentioned the let's call it the woo woo world. You know, a lot of people, they do associate the law of attraction with the world of woo woo. I am very much more the science. I want to know that why. I want to know how. I'm not just,
Yes.
well, just believe it, Will. I want to know what's the science behind it. How do I know this is replicable? How do I know that this isn't just a chance situation? So what are the core principles that you teach now that are let's call it the more science-based approaches or principles that will appease the slightly more logically minded person?
Yes. Well, I've taken 20 years of talking about vibration and energy and resistance and all those techniques and just layers of complicated stuff that people can debate and argue all day long and do, right? And taken all that away and brought it down to one sentence: your brain can change. The thing about that is no one's arguing that anymore. It's just clear known science that our brain is capable of change throughout the course of our lifetime. Definitely very early, and it gets maybe a little more resistant to change as you go because you've got so much other programming that you've got to wade through. But you can change your brain. And we can prove that to ourselves over and over. If we learn a new language, if we learn a new skill and it becomes ingrained in us and become part of our autopilot behavior, we have changed fundamentally a part of who we are being in the world. And so we can change our brain by the same way that it was changed or developed in the first place. And that is consistent information on a repetitive basis, on and on and on, until it becomes wired. All personal development is learning. It's learning to be a new version of you, like learning a new language or learning anything else. So we don't have to understand. Here's the thing about understanding, and that's what it was for me. And I thought if everybody just got the science of the law of attraction, of course they're going to see that it's a thing and they won't have any resistance and it's going to work. But no, 18 million other questions. Right? It's like your brain can change. Well, I don't know, it did. And we can talk very easily to show people how you've changed over the years, how your opinions have changed, how you make meaning out of things, how it's all changed. But it's been change that's happened as you've been coasting through life in reaction mode, mostly unconscious, just in response to what's happening. What we're talking about, when we're talking about taking on personal transformation intentionally, is saying, I'm going to make a conscious effort to override those autopilot thoughts so that they are something more empowering and move me into action that will get the results that I want in my life. The law of attraction works just automatically in the background without you focusing on it. The fact of the matter is no one needs to understand how the law of attraction works to transform. And it's fine if they're successfully changing the wiring of their brain by doing the things and they're interested in how the law of attraction works. But most people are not going to allow themselves to get results until they fully understand it and they have all their questions answered and they resolve all the conflicts from all the gurus and all the things. And that's folly. And we don't approach any other part of learning in our lives this way. We only do it when we're talking about bettering ourselves.
And that term that you're speaking about there, that's neuroplasticity as we know it to be now, right? It's neuroplasticity, it's just being able to change your brain.
Yeah, it's that simple. Neuroplasticity, just the ability for us to change our brain. And if we know that we can change our brain, if we can really just get it, then and know how we learn things in the first place, it becomes a matter of sort of going to school to learn how to be a new person, a new version of ourselves.
So just to challenge that slightly, I'm going to be one of these really annoying people that challenges it. Our brain is a bit of hardware. And if you said to most people, where is your mind? They will point to their head. Mm-hmm. Is it that people are changing their brain or is it they're changing their mind?
No, I think they're changing their brain. We're changing we're changing the chemistry. We're creating new neural pathways. This is a biological event. It creates a new autopilot in us. We behave the way we do on autopilot because of our brain and how we make meaning out of things in the moment, unconsciously, and take action as a result of that. But all of that meaning that we make is based on wiring that we received very early in our life from people who may or may not have had unlimited thinking. So we have to, if we are finding ourselves feeling stuck, it's our brain running a program. Literal wiring that is happening, synapses that are firing, connections that are being made in here. So we need to do what we need to do to create new connections, which requires consistency. So I think it happens out here. Mind is a much bigger concept. And again, when we start talking about that kind of stuff, and this isn't to, say, hey, don't ask questions like that. I'm just saying that most people, if we start talking like that, then it's going to add that layer of complexity. Like, wait a minute, mind, brain, what? Stop. You can change your brain. That's it. How do you want to change it? You can investigate all this stuff later, but if you can just get that you change your brain and we start these new behaviors and get excited about who you want to become and what the impact on the world is going to be and how it's going to feel, focus on that instead of, but how is it working?
So two things on that. I mean, I'm so glad you said that, because I completely agree, by the way. That wasn't me challenging it from a place of not agreeing, but I was just curious of what you'd say. The thing that I liken it to is a bit like a radio receiver. You have a radio receiver, and that radio's got those little dials that you can change the radio by giving it a different receiving frequency, and that change is kind of my maybe oversimplified version of what we're doing when we're creating these new neural pathways. It's almost like we're turning the dials, which is changing the radio. It's changing the radio frequency to enable us to be able to in your sort of be different. Is I don't know if you agree with that as an analogy, but in my simple mind is kind of how I've broken it down.
Well, it's definitely, we're changing something. But the radio station, you can change and change and change all day and all that. I mean, and you can with the brain as well. It's really just whatever analogy you need to use to get focused on who you want to be is totally fine, right? It's like if that's the way, if that thinking about it causes you to say, now I understand why I need to consistently act in this new way, then great, whatever it takes to do that.
So for you personally, you said 20 plus years ago, you had the experience of the law of attraction, and it was doing its thing, and many people know about that. But then you said in more recent times, that's when you had the shift, and then you've kind of moved more towards this sort of transformational piece. So other than being able to explain it to other people in a way they go, all right, I get it, what was the personal benefits that you got by having this new way of I suppose this new paradigm, if you want to call it that, or for you personally?
Well, my own experience in rewiring was I have been, as I said, I was the son of a school teacher, and I learned to go negative before positive, right? Like always, if something came up, it's like, well, here's why, very skeptical in nature and assuming the worst. Like if a possible scenario came up, I would reference all my past and say, oh my God, if this keeps up, it's going to go like this, and this is going to be a terrible thing. Now, this continued through my adulthood, past the secret, everything. It was just something I always kept having to override or do, EFT or some process on. And it was when I had the aha around my brain and wiring, it's like, well, because every time I nurture that feeling, when I have that trigger, something triggers me, and I sit there and allow myself to go down that road, I'm just solidifying those neural pathways, the chemistry's in there, and I'm just making it more and more true. So I had to consciously do an interrupt, and say that basically the mantra is this reaction I'm having isn't the truth, it's just my wiring. So as true as it and terrible as it feels, there are other ways I could interpret this situation, even though it didn't seem like it at the time. The thing about how we're wired and our truth is we don't think about it as interpretation. It's just the truth. This is what is. But when we can see that our truth is not necessarily the truth, and that we can choose another truth for ourselves that is more empowering, makes us feel better, makes us take more positive action, then we should get excited about doing that. And that is what I did. I had this major trigger in my life that kept coming up, and then I just started to say, and very intentionally, this doomsday scenario that I've been painting for 10 years has never happened. There is no evidence that this truth that I am saying is true at all. So let's just make up something different and improve the quality of our life. And that's what I did. And over the course of, I don't know, I'm going to say 5 or 6 months or so, I realized that I don't have that trigger. Or if I did, it was like a moment and not a week, because it would take me out of the game. And so that was, and I thought basically that was like impossible. Like that was so deep. But then like before I got the whole neuroplasticity and my brain can change. Of course it can, but I keep telling it the same thing over and over. So why am I expecting it to change? So I had to change my conversation, just like I did 22 years ago when I first learned the law of attraction.
Lovely. Thank you very much for sharing that. So in terms of the key things. Let's talk practically now. If someone is one of these people right now that they've been having fears about something happening, or what I think is actually sometimes more challenging for people is not necessarily the fear of something that's never happened that they keep fearing is going to happen, but the story they're telling themselves about a situation that is their reality. It's not necessarily, it's just not, it doesn't have to be their reality. It's kind of a truth, not the truth, as you just mentioned.
Yes.
How do they start going about having this transformation?
Yeah. So first of all, you nailed a big part of it. It's the stories. The stories we tell ourselves, both to ourselves, to others, and internally, subconsciously. Because what we're saying is, the wiring happens, learning happens because you're giving it the same information over and over, making those neural pathways really strong. Well, we're having conversations with ourselves all the time. We have self-talk going nonstop. And a lot of it's not that great. So if we just do affirmations for 30 minutes a day and then just go back to our autopilot, we're not going to see a change because we're really feeding ourselves the same information over and over. We're not really changing at a deeper level. So the thing that I always do with people first, whenever I work with anybody, is I give them a quick quiz that shows them some of their autopilot behavior, because recognizing where you are in autopilot is the first step. When you can shine a light on, oh yeah, I do that. Right? I do that. What could I do different? If you can recognize it, you can change it. But if you don't recognize it, you're just going to keep doing it. So the first step is to understand something about your autopilot behavior. You may know some of it already. You may not know some of it. Any information about any autopilot behavior is valuable, because then you can start visualizing yourself acting in a different way, responding in a different way. The law of attraction conversation is so much about visualization, which is true. It's valid. Our brain is the reality creation machine. We have the ability to imagine events that have not yet occurred. Now, events, product, physical things, jobs, relationship. We can imagine all of it. But what we need to be doing, which what most people aren't doing, is they're imagining all the outer stuff. They're not imagining who they need to be to have that, because it's not who you're being now. Who you're being now has gotten you this. If you want that, you need to imagine, what is that version of me doing that's different than what I'm doing here? You need to analyze the gap in behavior. Like, that guy's always on time, doesn't make excuses for being late. That guy, exercises. He doesn't make excuses for it. These are all behaviors that you can do right now. You don't wait for the thing to happen. You do them now, and then the thing can happen, because you're taking the action. You're being the person who's going to get the results of that desire. But sitting here, looking at a vision board, going, okay, where is it? It's not how it works. That's just not how it works.
So it's a bit like this, the thing of, if you want to be, do. So if you want to be an Olympic athlete, what does an Olympic athlete do? Well, an Olympic rower gets up at 5 a.m. They train for an hour on the road. I don't know. I'm making it up in terms of, I don't know what they actually do, but it's what's the behaviors of that individual. But what I also think is really important, though, and this is part of what I've spent best part of 20 years being obsessed with, is it's not just what they do in terms of the doing, but it's what they're thinking too. Right. Yes. Because two people can do exactly the same thing, but if one's got one story, and come back to the story going on internally, and another one's got another story internally, then they can actually have two, maybe not necessarily even two different outcomes, but they can definitely have two very different experiences.
Absolutely. And again, that's all wiring, right? That the wiring determines their experience. And it's interesting. You were talking about people can do the same thing on the outside, but who they're being on the inside and what's driving that behavior will have an impact on the outcome. It's interesting because we communicate with each other in all these almost invisible ways, like little micro expressions, a little flick of an eyebrow in a conversation that can say, hey, this guy isn't 100% confident about what he's saying, or whatever. It's like little tiny things that if you were just to visualize yourself being the more empowered version of yourself, you might not do. It's little tiny tweaks, but so much of this is about confidence and just choosing who you're going to be, and then being that boldly and letting the world freaking deal with it. Because that's what's going to happen. If you change who you're being out in the world in a significant way, be ready to be uncomfortable. That's what growth is. Congratulations. That's good. That's a good thing. And B, the world is now going to respond to a different way of you being. And guess what? Not everybody is going to be on board. So you've got to be in love with your vision and it be worth the journey. And that's the biggest problem with people and personal transformation is their transformation, their goals, their vision. They're not non-negotiable. They'd be awesome, but they're not non-negotiable. And so if they're not non-negotiable, when that discomfort, when that period of huge growth is about to occur and you're going, I can't do this. Here's all the evidence that says I can't do this. If you don't have some kind of support, a coach or a group or somebody to say, hey, here's 11 different ways right now you could look at this situation, most likely through no fault of your own and not because you're bad or not enlightened or unintelligent, you're going to tap into all the resources you have and your old wiring is going to say, no, I got to go back the other way.
Love it. On that note, I was speaking with someone yesterday and they're a successful person in their own right. But one of the things that they say is that I've struggled my whole life to be the person that just doesn't care what people think. I would love to not care what people think about what I look like, what I'm doing, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
How does your transformation process apply to someone like that? Because they're telling themselves, so I want to not care what people think, but no matter how hard I try, I still care what people think.
I think that they're stuck on the wanting to not have that reaction and they haven't really seen it through, played it through in their mind. What does it look like to not care what other people think? You can sit there and imagine somebody judging the hell out of you in the way you hate the most that just shuts you down. You can imagine it over and over and over and play and get more and more comfortable with how would it feel to not be fazed by this? It's going to take a little bit of time because you've been wired to be fazed by it for however many years. So don't expect to have one session of trying to, I'm going to override that and then it work. That's not how learning works on any other level, on any other subject. It takes repetition. So it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be worth it, right? Because what would it be like to not care? What would you do in the world? What would you accomplish in the world? What risk would you take? What would you create if you didn't care what somebody who isn't doing what you're doing and probably won't thinks? The best thing you can do is go for it and make tons of mistakes. Let them freaking laugh at you and say, I told you so, but you keep going. Just like the guy who invented the iPhone and did anything else, you keep going despite the mistakes, and you don't make the mistake mean a failure. It's feedback. It's good. Yes, another way this isn't going to work. Hooray. Now I get to adjust. As long as you keep going, you're going to rewire, and the people who were laughing at you will be left behind going, I'm still miserable. But you've got to be able to see it. You got to be able to see it. You can't this is the whole thing about this. It's one thing to say, I'm in my autopilot behavior. But if you're not ready with something to replace it with, well, you're just probably going to go back and go, God, I even caught myself and I couldn't do it. Now that's another layer of conversation about how you can't do this.
I think you said about the replacing thing is so vital, isn't it? The analogy that I love is that if you had a weed and you kept cutting the weed, it's going to keep growing. Whereas you take the weed out, you think that's okay, but another weed can grow in its place. Whereas if you take the weed out, replace it with a flower and keep pruning the flower, which is that's a much more effective way of being. So talk about the transformation personality types. That's the quiz,
Sure.
and we're going to put the link in the show notes. People can go and do it. We recommend you do it. It's free. It's going to take you a couple of minutes. What are the types?
Okay. So again, the purpose of the quiz is to shine light on autopilot behavior. So over the course of 20 years, I've worked with gazillions of people and I've heard all their stories, right? And why they can't and seen a lot of behavior. And so I was able to just sort of break them down into these 4 categories that I call these types. Now, I want to say up front that just because you're one of these types, there's nothing wrong with any of these types. And if you are one of these types, it doesn't mean you're sabotaging yourself. This quiz exists for people who are feeling stuck, who do not know what they are doing to themselves to keep themselves getting the same results. So you take the quiz and you're going to be one of 4 things. You shared with me that you were a seeker, and that is the number one that I get. Probably because I'm in the personal development industry. So the people who are going to come through my sphere are probably looking for some answers. So they're seeking. The seeker is someone who is definitely driven to be the best version of themselves and is very excited about learning and growing. And so but the problem is they will take every little course that comes along. They'll go see every little thing. They'll adopt every philosophy or many, right? It's just like either it's shiny object. Oh, that one sounds better. Or what happens a lot is they're in a program that they totally were on board with. I really resonate with this. I'm doing this program. They're telling all their friends about it. And then they get to the part where it's hard, where it's uncomfortable, where they're asked to do something. And then they see another program out there that seems a little easier. Oh, well, this one says it's going to be like flow. I'm just going to. And so the problem with all of these philosophies and ideas is what can happen is just chaos. You got all these different philosophies and approaches that you're trying to resolve, plus going against your, comparing them with your current belief systems. And you're trying this, you're trying that. No wiring really gets to form because you're not doing any one thing consistently. Now, of course, this is a generalization, but that's generally how the seekers work. So the seekers just need to choose. If they say this thing resonates with them, if they know in their heart they've evaluated, go through the discomfort and at least finish it and get what you can out of it before you start moving on. Because every time you say, well, this one didn't work, or this one didn't work, or this one didn't work, then you're just telling it's another layer of quote unquote failure on a subconscious level, or it could be conscious too. And now it's going to be, you're going, well, I wonder if this one works. I wonder if this one works. And you can just feel energetically what that's bringing to the table.
So that's the seeker. What are the other three?
So another one is the wizard. And the wizard is, I got a lot of those too, especially in the law of attraction conversation. They love the ritual. They love the vision boards, the visualizing, all the stuff, to the alchemy of I'm going to manifest, right? I'm going to my natural wizardry. I used to use that word all the time in my stuff. Unleash your natural wizardry, I would say. The problem with the wizards that I'm talking about is they stop at the ritual. Like they do all the visualization and the meditation and all the exercises and all those things. And now they're just waiting for the universe to get with their vibe and bring it to them. But that's not how it works. All of those rituals, all those exercises, all those things that the wizard is doing are there to hopefully show them how they need to be. You have these things they're trying to manifest. Vision board is there so you can say, okay, who am I in this scenario with these things? So anyway, I could go off on another whole tangent on the vision board stuff, but the wizard basically just needs to move into the action part, to go out there in the world and be this thing that they're visualizing or conjuring or alchemizing or whatever they want to call it with their wizardry. So that's the wizard. Next one is the skeptic, and that's what I would have tested at, and pretty self-explanatory. The skeptic, and there's nothing wrong with being a skeptic because, it stops you from doing a lot of stupid stuff. But what I'm talking about is when you're so skeptical that you just say no to everything first. The problem with the skeptic that I'm talking about is when they have an opportunity, it's a program they're evaluating or anything in their life that could make it better. The question they automatically ask themselves is, why won't this work for me? And if you ask that question of yourself in this amazing brain of yours, you're going to have answers. They're going to show you a lifetime of answers of why this won't work for you. But if you just asked a different question, you'd get different answers. Like, for example, how could this work for me? You still get to be a skeptic. You still get to be using your intellect. No one's going to take you for a ride. I'm not going to look stupid. But you're asking a way better question because your brain is also capable of giving you ways that this could work for you. And if you can do that and you can start to visualize how, well, if it did work this way, who could I be? What could I have? Then maybe you'll take a chance. Maybe you'll start that process. But you'll never, the skeptic gets to be right all the time if they say no to everything. So it doesn't work because I didn't do it, whatever. So that's the skeptic. The skeptic just needs to ask a different question. And then finally, it's the people pleaser. The people pleaser is the one who really wants to grow. They want their life to change. They've been inspired. They read the book. They did whatever. Now it's time. And like I alluded to before, as soon as they start taking on that new behavior or stating their intention for this new, better way, they start getting the looks and the feedback from their parents or their family or their coworkers or friends or whatever about like, well, I don't know, who are you to do that? Or I don't think you could, whatever. Those types of things. Or you can just basically feel that everybody around you is really uncomfortable with this move you're making. And so the people pleaser put to break on their transformation so that everybody stays comfortable. That's what they think. Okay, I don't want this tension. I don't want this look. I just want everybody to be comfortable. So fine, I'm fine where I am. And of course, they aren't comfortable. They're just not telling you about their discomfort because you're not poking it, anymore. But they're feeling stuck, which is why they would tell you you can't do anything. And of course, you just gave up on your freaking dream. The reason you're here, that passion that's calling to you, it's been there for freaking years. It's there to do. It would be awesome. Yeah, there's a journey ahead, but wow, if you could do it. But you're not going to do it because mom's going to give you a look. So the people pleaser just needs to go for it and live their life. Here's because you're surrounded with the people that you're surrounded with very appropriately based on who you're being now. You be somebody else, these people may or may not still be your tribe, but you will find a new one, and the new tribe will celebrate who you are and the things you're up to and celebrate what your vision is and all of that. It's a totally different situation. It's not like you never have to speak to these other people again, but they certainly don't have to have an influence on how you do your life.
Love that. Thank you very much. So you wrote a book called Follow Your Passion and Find Your Power.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what you're talking about in terms of basically choosing who do you want to be,
yes,
and then identifying the behaviors, the thinking process, and all the things that enable people to be able to move forward with that are part of those components that enable that to happen. And like you say, patience is a big piece of this, adding a good old bit of time to let everything marinate in. But what about the unconscious patterns or limiting beliefs, if you want to call it, that people have running that prevent them from even thinking about being the person they want to be able to follow their passion and find their power?
If they want to, if they're willing to, be open to a conversation and some coaching, well, that's what coaching's for. I mean, somebody who's been doing this for a really long time knows how to ask the questions of a person like that. They're not the same questions for everybody, but it's like, let's tap back into their sense of passion and just ask I love logic, right? Are you a human? Do you have a human brain? Do you understand that this is how the brain learns? Do you understand that you've been telling yourself this and fighting for your position for this many years? Does it then make sense that this would be your belief system? Yes. Can you look out in the world and see that other people have different belief systems? Yes. And they take different action than you do? Yes. They make different meaning than you do, and they get different results? Yes. If you took that action, if you made that meaning, if that was a part of who you were, could you see that you could get those results? Pause, pause, pause. Yes. So what do we need to do to change those behaviors? You don't have to know everything about this future version of you. You won't. That's going to be discovered along the way because you've got some stuff to learn. You don't know what you don't know, but you can if you can identify even a couple of things that you know are not going to work to be that person, you start right there. Because that one little behavior change can branch out and show you all sorts of other different ways of being. It's going to start the ripple effect of change, and you've got new opportunity to respond to. So you just start with where you are and what you know. You do not have to have the whole complete picture. You do not need to know how it's going to happen. You just need to know, to the best of your ability, who do you want to be?
Love it. There's such a big emphasis on as you just said, getting clear on who you want to be. What's your advice for people right now that are saying, well, I kind of know who I want to be in the short term, but I don't know who I want to be in the long term?
That's okay. It really is. It's like, as long as you have any vision of growth at all, start with that. I mean, you don't, because see, here's the thing about any vision or goal. As you start your journey towards it, it will most likely evolve. That's why you don't get attached to the thing, because as you grow and meet new people and learn new things and get new feedback, you may realize, well, I was thinking small, or that's not exactly it, but this over here, right? And so, but you'll never get to that point if you don't start the journey with what you know.
You say about don't get detached. So let's say, for example, attached. Don't get attached. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of a good example, but maybe it's not the if we can break that down and we can and you can explain the nuances between having a goal,
yes,
desiring something and wanting something.
Yes.
And because that's something that I personally, for many, many, many years, really struggled with was, well, if I don't want to be attached and I've not got any form of emotion involved with achieving that outcome, then what's the point of even striving for it?
Yeah, it's not so attachment, again, it's mostly about like what I just said. Attachment is limiting, because no matter how big you're thinking right now about how awesome that thing is, as you grow and move towards it, you might change that. Again, if your focus is on an external thing, any sort of external outcome, and you're not clear on who you are in that, then it becomes weird, because you're attached to a thing rather than just something you actually have control over, which is you.
Mm.
So, your vision is there to pull you through the experience of life. You don't attach to it. You are grateful that you have it because it moves you through the journey of learning new things, of having the ups and downs, that rich experience of life, right? But it can change, but you're just grateful that you have it in the first place. It's not about that you being unattached doesn't mean you don't want it. But ultimately, anything you have out there that is a goal is about the feeling you're going to get when you have that goal. And you're just imagining, you're thinking that you will have that feeling when you have that goal. You don't know it for sure, but that's what's pulling you through the action you're taking to move towards that goal. So you can have the goal, be excited about the goal, envision the goal, but being attached to it, like if I don't get that, I'm not happy, misses the point.
Mm. No, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. So one other final thing from me before we kind of get everybody to make sure they're taking their transformation tests is Wealth Beyond Reason. This was a program of yours that you I think it was 2002. You said that you started that program.
Yep.
Ran it for many, many years, and people can still get the books now and access it. Yep. I believe. For people that want to create wealth, in fact, let's just let me ask you: how do you define wealth?
Being able to do what I want when I want. I want to have the experience of life. So if I want to go play the ukulele all day, I want to be able to have the financial means or whatever, call it wealth, call it what you will, but the means to do it. So there's no dollar amount. There's no because everybody has a different set point for what is going to bring them the experience of joy in their life. So whatever my situation is that allows me to do that, wealth, success, I kind of put them together. I mean, if it's just monetary, it's just arbitrary. That's just it's different for everybody. So I do not attach wealth, and I never have, to a number.
Interesting. So for you, like as you said, it's being able to do what you want, when you want, how you want, where you want, with whom you want, whatever.
Because a lot of people with a lot of money
freedom.
can't do that. A lot of people with a lot of money cannot do that because they've got to do all the stuff to maintain that money. So it's finding that balance, like how much, I mean, look, abundance and prosperity, it's good. It allows you to go be the most powerful version of yourself, do the things, take the options, but not everybody has the same budgetary needs to be that.
What was the experience that you had? I'm sure I remember reading where it involved you doing I think it was some sort of meditation, and then like a friend literally showering you with money or something. Or have I slightly misunderstood what I?
If it's from, would that have been from the Wealth Beyond Reason book?
It was from Follow Your Passion and Find Your Power.
Either way, that was 12 years ago, and I just don't remember. I just don't remember the details. But I mean, one of the key things that I want. This is from Wealth Beyond Reason, though. Before anything hit financially for me or whatever, and I was still kind of in my journey. I remember, and this is a story from the book about, and I think the title is like "Who Wants to Be a Millionaire" or something of the chapter, and it was about how do you, the idea is how do you visualize $1 million if you've never had it, or being a millionaire if you've never had $1 million? How do you know what a millionaire feels like, right? So I was washing the dishes and I'm going, well, if I had $1 million, what would that allow me to feel emotionally? What could I let go of in terms of worry? What could I, so it became less about the money, but the concept of just freedom, financial freedom, enough, whatever enough is. And that really, like, I remember my body changing, from being up here to just like trying on, like, what if in this moment, everything's handled, whether it's $1 million, 2 million, 100,000, whatever it takes to feel that way. That was what was important, not focusing on the dollar amount. Now, I know tons of people in my space talk about give a specific number, give a specific date, all that stuff. And I think that does absolutely work for some people. It didn't work for me because the way I was wired, it was too much stress and pressure, right? Then my brain automatically kicks in, but how that amount? How that day? What about this? Rather than just like feeling the feeling now. And then what that does when you embody that feeling is it changes your behavior. You do these, like I said, these slight little things that maybe from the outside, no one would even notice that it's different, but it starts a totally different trajectory. And that's what happened for me.
It's kind of the irony, isn't it? Is that ultimately when we achieve any goal is set and desired to be achieved to create a feeling where you can feel that feeling in any moment anyway.
Yes, it is. And man, oh man, when somebody really gets that, it's pretty big because we can imagine ourselves into the feeling that we're going to work 20 years to achieve. so that we don't have to imagine it. It's really, that's a whole other deep conversation, because you're right. We can just create our experience of reality by closing our eyes right now and imagining whatever feeling, whatever wealth, and create the chemistry, and our brain doesn't know. So we should do that. But while we're doing that, imagine who we're being in this scenario, and imagine it so much that it just becomes a part of our natural expression. And then, like I say, the world just changes, not out of magic, but because you're giving a different input.
Which comes back to that whole the whole thing, and I've spoken about it on the podcast before, of the difference between doing to have to be versus being.
Yes.
And then doing from that place of being, and then having from that place of being. You know,
as a result of the being you've done, and the action you've taken, what you've put out in the world. That's where results come from.
Amazing. So, Bob, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. You and I could speak for hours and hours and hours on this topic, and
there's a lot of rabbit holes.
Absolutely, you know, we nearly opened one up there. How can people connect with you, and most importantly, how can people get access to take the transformation personality type quiz?
Sure. So the quiz is at tptquiz.com, for transformation personality type quiz.com. And that will lead you into learning a lot more about who I am and what I do. But you can also go to meetbobdoyle.com, and the quiz is a link to the quiz is there too. And you can learn about coaching and speaking and all the other Bob Doyleables.
Fantastic. So we'll put those in the show notes so you guys can get access to them straight away. Bob, again, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And guys, definitely go and check out the quiz. Get your transformation personality type, and there's Bob very kindly shares a significant insight in the form of a video once you've taken that quiz, and give you lots of little insights. I certainly got that when I did mine. So thanks, Bob, and for everyone that's been listening, I hope you found it beneficial. Until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.